Hello there, I'm Amireh Rezai Kamalabad, and today Teen Arts Council is meeting with Mark Dion to talk about his exhibition here at the ICA, The Misadventures of a 21st Century Naturalist. So I have some questions prepared, but mostly it's just going to be an open discussion with all of Teen Arts Council and Mark. And I thought maybe to get us started, you could tell us a little bit about this piece we're sitting in front of, Memory Box.
It's an immersive piece that people can enter. And inside you are in a quite dark and tight space, confronted with a shelf full of boxes. And they're allowed to open them. And each box is filled with, I think, something kind of remarkable and strange. It's meant to kind of end the show on a moment of wonder, because some of the pieces in this last gallery tend to be more melancholic. It's sort of very playful, and you can take your time. And throughout the exhibition, we've been saying, don't touch anything. And so finally, there's this kind of payoff if you make it all the way to the end.
I know that when I have personal objects that I'm able to reflect on and have memories attached to them, I find it kind of therapeutic to be able to look back onto those moments. Do you think that the way that you've become kind of a collector in your time as an artist has been really therapeutic in the way that you process thoughts, or maybe even process thoughts that you had before that are now being able to look back on it from a different point in time?
Well, I'm not sure if it's therapeutic, but it's definitely evocative. I think that, some people get a lot from being in these kind of clean, modern spaces, but I get a lot from being in cluttered spaces. I get a lot from things, objects speak to me. And, I guess in a way it is therapeutic, because it is that the objects are that tool that helps me conceptualize something or takes me somewhere. And in that sense, I think you're probably right. This is really not a piece about me in a way. Even if a lot of the objects are mine, I try to keep it very open and broad, and I try not to make it too much of a kind of gendered space in a way that it becomes just about me and where I come from. And this relates a little bit to that kind of mystery I felt as a kid, what's in those places? They're always just such fascinating mysteries. And when we were kids, we were just always trying to find ways to get into these places. And a lot of them had little doors where chickens could go, and we could kind of crawl up in them and then find someone's fantastical workshop.
But what is the process of your art coming to life? Is it do you kind of can you go out somewhere and you're wow, this is very inspiring, I want to create a piece off of this? Or is it more I need to, or you feel making a piece, so you kind of search around?
For me, the beginning is always the place. Where is, I often do work on location. I'm not a person who I don't even have a studio. So a lot of my artist friends, they have a studio that they go to every day and they work there. And I don't have that. I've never really been able to, I've never been able to afford to have a studio, but I also have never been able to make that work for me conceptually. So I go on site, and often the location is connected with an exhibition. And so but the site is the thing that really orients me, that really tells me what I need to do in a sense. And that gives me the ability to kind of think through and find a direction. I always think I'm looking for this thread. I want to pick up this thread and follow that and find where it goes. But I need to go to the place to find the thread.
Who do you imagine your audience to be some type of audience? Are they maybe an audience with more understanding of science, or an audience with more understanding of art? Or maybe an audience with more understanding of what it's like to grow up on a farm and have these chicken coops in their backyard?
This was originally shown in an art gallery in Manhattan. So there's a lot of assumptions I can make about who's going to walk through that door. You don't just kind of stumble on a place like that. You really have to go with intent. But I can't make those assumptions about the ICA, because there's a really broad audience here. I mean, that's one of, I think, the big successes of this as an institution, is that it's a pretty welcoming institution. And and you see people from all walks of life here. It's or any of the works. I think about it not only in our moment, but also into the future. Like the piece, like the Cabinet of Marine Debris, it has all of these kind of bottle shapes and things that we're very familiar with, but maybe in 25 years, plastic bottles are outlawed and we won't see those shapes anymore. I don't know. I think that's one of the great things about art is you can think about it having this long life beyond yourself.
And do you think those same ideas would translate if your art was shown in a science-based museum, like a natural history museum, as opposed to the ICA, which is an art museum?
Science museums kind of ask the questions and give the answers. And the art museum is about constructing a space where the viewer has a lot of control to disagree with the artists, very much about having a playful relationship with science and a kind of frustrating relationship with it, and frustrating expectations of what art and science are, in a sense.
At one point in your experience with art, did you like detach yourself from like this concept that like art is just simply like paintings and sculptures, when like your pieces are much more than that? They're like really interactive.
I grew up in a very blue-collar family. My mother was a factory worker, my father unloaded trucks, and they were not people who went to museums at all. And, they were not, my mother never read a book in her life. Like, just that whole kind of intellectual culture just wasn't part of my upbringing. I was drawn to art, but I had no models for what art was, except for album covers and dinosaur illustrations. So I thought I was going to go and be a dinosaur illustrator. So I went to art school that had this famous dinosaur illustrator there. And then within like the first week, I was introduced to this whole world of contemporary art and saw the work of very challenging contemporary artists who were doing performance and video and painting and conceptual art. And, suddenly I was just absolutely hooked.
What was your connection between you and animals?
Between me and animals?
Mm-hmm.
It's a complicated connection between myself and animals. I think about myself as someone who's interested in wild things and wild places and in conservation. At the same time, I use the kind of language of using animal bodies that exists in science and in the history of art depicting animals. So whether that's pictorially or really using dead animals as a kind of medium, which I do. So at the same time, there's no doubt it's a very uncomfortable and ambivalent relationship. I do it as part of getting to what I want to say, but I don't really take a kind of pleasure in it. Like for me, it's a bit of a it's a bit of a ordeal. It's like an appalling aspect of doing the work. At one point early in my life, I had this very divided life between being an artist and thinking about the history of art stuff and art theory and the philosophy around art as my educational experience. But then I had my weekend trips camping with my friends and fishing and hiking and doing these things. And I felt like I was like two different people. And then at a certain point, I realized that all of these intellectual tools I was getting from this education, I could apply to whatever I wanted.
Right now in the museum, and we can even hear them in the background, you have your piece that's the Library for Birds of Massachusetts, and it has live birds in it. And so I was wondering if you could explain a little bit of your thinking behind like what inspired you to bring living birds into an art museum.
On one hand, I want that close encounter that you have with birds when you go into that piece to be a profound one, a really interesting one. And I want you to get close and have an intimacy with them. At the same time, I want you to see that the birds are really different from us, that they don't really care about the things we care about. They don't really care about what we imagine they should care about. They perceive differently, they think differently. We can be intimate with them in terms of space, but we can never really get into their heads. It's a very funny idea that one would build a library for birds. And the fact that the birds are pooping on the books just drives home how crazy that is, and ripping up the books to make their nests.
We were really inspired by your piece, When Dinosaurs Ruled the Earth. That's like the child
Right.
bedroom with all the dinosaurs. And we wanted to test your knowledge of dinosaurs.
Okay. Oh
So
my goodness.
we want to see if you can name that
Okay. That would be the Tyrannosaurus Rex.
dinosaur. All right. So that's like the buzzer gets one. Maybe you can edit that in later.
That would also be the Tyrannosaurus Rex.
And do you recognize the name?
Barney.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you know this dinosaur?
Is that a dinosaur or a alligator, a crocodile?
Do you recognize the character?
No, I do not.
Oh no, really?
Nope. Well, that's Godzilla.
Okay. And that one we're confirming is a dinosaur?
It's really tricky. It's so much bigger than any dinosaur that ever lived.
Or that you've ever seen, at least, right?
Yeah, or that's the ever discovered by science. So yeah, I would say it is a life form remarkably close in anatomy to a dinosaur. Yeah.
I think this last image is the most challenging,
Okay.
and it might cause some debate, but
Oh, I would say that this is an ancestor of dinosaurs. Or is
Okay.
it ancestor? No, dinosaurs are an ancestor of it.
yeah, something like that, right?
Something like that. Yeah.
And it's a,
It looks like a rooster.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
And-
that's very interesting.
And
That's
so you win. Well, thank you so much for meeting with us today, and we know your exhibition opens tomorrow, so we're really excited to spend some more time walking around the galleries and getting to know your art a little bit more.
excellent. Thank you.